The private dining room at Bellacourt Restaurant buzzed with celebration as my family gathered around the elegantly set table for Mom's 55th birthday. Crystal champagne flutes caught the warm candlelight, and the scent of expensive roses filled the air. I sat between my sister Carmen and my brother-in-law Diego, watching everyone toast Mom with glasses of Dom Perignon that cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. To our beautiful mother, my older brother Miguel announced, raising his glass high. 55 years of grace, wisdom, and showing us what success really looks like. Everyone clinked glasses enthusiastically. Mom beamed in her designer dress, surrounded by her accomplished children and their equally successful spouses. Miguel owned 3 luxury car dealerships across the state. Carmen had built a thriving interior design firm that catered to millionaire clients. Even my youngest sister Sophia had just made partner at her law firm at age 29. Then there was me, 32-year-old Isabella, sitting quietly in my simple black dress from Target, sipping water instead of champagne because I couldn't afford to drink $200 wine on a Tuesday night. "Isabella, sweetie," Mom said, her voice taking on that particular tone of gentle concern that always made my stomach clench. "How are things going with your little consulting business?" The entire table turned to look at me, their faces displaying various degrees of sympathy and curiosity. My little consulting business. That's how they described my work for the past 6 years, as if I was selling handmade jewelry at craft fairs instead of running a legitimate company. "It's going well," I said quietly, cutting into my salmon. "Steady growth, good client relationships. But you're still working from home, right?" Carmen asked with false brightness. "In that tiny apartment downtown? I have a home office, yes." Miguel leaned forward with the patronizing smile he'd perfected since business school. "Isabel, I've been thinking. You know I'm expanding the dealerships into Arizona next year. I could use someone to handle the administrative side. Filing, scheduling, maybe some basic bookkeeping. It's not glamorous, but it's steady income with benefits." "Real benefits," Carmen added enthusiastically. "Health insurance, vacation time, a 401k. All the things freelancers miss out on." I felt heat rising in my cheeks. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm happy with my current work." "Sweetie," Mom reached across the table and patted my hand with the kind of pitying gesture usually reserved for sick pets. "You're 32 years old and still living paycheck to paycheck. There's no shame in admitting when something isn't working." The words hit like a slap. Around the table I saw nodding heads and sympathetic expressions. Sophia's husband whispered something to her that made her glance at me with concern. "Mom, I'm not living paycheck to paycheck," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh honey," Mom's laugh was gentle but devastating. "You drove here in that old Honda Civic. You're wearing a dress I've seen you wear to 3 family events. You turned down the appetizer course because you said you weren't that hungry, but we all know it's because you're watching every penny." My sister Carmen nodded sadly. "Bella, we love you exactly as you are, but we're worried about your future. What happens when you get sick? What about retirement? You can't freelance forever." "The economy is tough right now," Diego added helpfully. "Especially for small businesses and independent contractors. There's no guarantee in that kind of work." Miguel set down his wine glass with the authority of someone who'd never had a financial worry in his life. "Look, I'm serious about the job offer. You could start at $45,000 a year, which is probably more stable income than you've ever had. After a year or 2, if you prove yourself, we could look at promoting you to office manager." $45,000 a year. They thought that would be a promotion for me. I looked around the table at my family, people who loved me but had somehow completely missed understanding what I'd built over the past 6 years. They saw the old car, the simple clothes, the downtown apartment, and assumed they knew my whole story. "I really am fine," I said, but even I could hear how weak it sounded. "Isabella." Mom's voice carried that finality that meant the conversation was over. "You're still living paycheck to paycheck at 32. That's not fine, sweetheart. That's something we need to face honestly." The weight of their collective judgment pressed down on me. These were the people who'd raised me, who'd celebrated every achievement and supported every dream. The fact that they'd somehow missed the biggest achievement of my life felt like a failure on my part. Just as I was about to excuse myself to the bathroom to regroup, my phone rang. The ringtone cut through the restaurant's gentle background music like an alarm bell. "Sorry," I mumbled, reaching for my purse. "I should turn this off." But when I glanced at the screen, my heart stopped. First National Private Banking. David Chin, my private wealth manager, was calling at 8:30 on a Tuesday night. He only called for important matters and never this late unless something significant had happened. I should take this, I said, standing up. It might be important. Bella, we're having dinner, Carmen protested. Can't your work call wait? It's probably someone trying to sell her something, Miguel said with a chuckle. Those sales calls always come at dinner time. I looked at my family, all of them certain they knew exactly what this call represented. Another sign of my struggling financial situation. A sales call, a bill collector, maybe a client with a problem that couldn't wait. Something shifted inside me. After 6 years of letting them believe their assumptions, after 6 years of letting them think I was barely scraping by, I was suddenly tired of pretending. Actually, I said, sitting back down and placing the phone in the center of the table. I think you should all hear this. I answered the call and immediately put it on speaker. The entire table could now hear everything. Good evening, Ms. Martinez. This is David Chin from First National Private Banking. I apologize for calling so late, but I wanted to personally confirm that your trust fund transfer has been completed successfully. The chatter around the table died instantly. 8 pairs of eyes stared at my phone as David's professional voice filled the private dining room. The $47 million transfer from your business holdings into the Martinez Family Foundation has been processed and will be available tomorrow morning. All documentation has been filed with the appropriate regulatory agencies, and your tax advisors have been notified. Mom's champagne flute froze halfway to her lips. Miguel's mouth fell open. Carmen made a small choking sound that she tried to cover with a cough. Thank you, David, I said calmly, as if discussing multi-million-dollar transfers was a normal part of my Tuesday evening. Were there any issues with the international portions of the transfer? None at all. The transfers from your London and Singapore accounts proceeded smoothly. Your total liquid assets now stand at $73 million across all portfolios, with the foundation representing approximately 65% of your holdings. Sophia dropped her fork. It clattered against her plate with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Excellent, I continued. And the quarterly reports for Martinez Consulting Group are ready for review? Yes, Ms. Martinez. Revenue for Q3 exceeded projections by 23%, bringing your annual income to approximately $12 million. The expansion into European markets has been particularly successful. I could feel my family staring at me, but I kept my voice professional and calm. Thank you, David. I'll review everything tomorrow morning. Have a good evening. Certainly, Ms. Martinez. Congratulations again on the foundation establishment. It's a remarkable philanthropic initiative. I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my purse. Then I looked up at my family's faces. The silence was complete. Even the background music seemed to have stopped. Mom sat frozen with her champagne glass still suspended in midair. Miguel's confident smile had vanished entirely. Carmen was staring at me as if I'd just performed a magic trick that defied all laws of physics. $73 million? Sophia whispered, her voice barely audible. Actually, that's just the liquid assets, I clarified gently. The total portfolio includes real estate holdings, business equity, and some private investments. The full valuation is closer to $94 million. Diego's wine glass slipped from his hand, sending Cabernet Sauvignon cascading across the white tablecloth. He didn't even notice. Isabella. Mom's voice came out as a croak. What just happened? I smoothed my target dress and smiled at my family. My wealth manager called to confirm that I've established a charitable foundation with $47 million in initial funding. It's something I've been planning for the past 2 years. Wealth manager? Miguel repeated slowly as if the words were in a foreign language. David Chin from First National Private Banking. He's been handling my accounts since Martinez Consulting Group hit its first $10 million year. That was about 4 years ago. Carmen found her voice first. Martinez Consulting Group. That's your little freelance business. It's a technology consulting firm specializing in enterprise software solutions for Fortune 500 companies. We have offices in 5 cities now, with 78 full-time employees and contracts with some of the largest corporations in the world. 78 employees, Dad repeated numbly. He'd been so quiet during dinner that I'd almost forgotten he was there. 82 as of last week, actually. We just hired a new team for the London office. The waiter approached our table to refill water glasses, took one look at my family's shell-shocked expressions and quietly backed away. But your apartment, Carmen stammered. Your car. Your clothes. I live simply because I choose to, I explained. The downtown loft is actually a penthouse that I bought outright 3 years ago. I drive the Honda because it's reliable and practical for city driving. I have other vehicles for when I need them. Other vehicles? Miguel's voice cracked slightly. The Tesla for longer trips, and there's a company car service for client meetings. But honestly, I prefer the Honda for everyday use. Mom finally set down her champagne glass, her hands visibly shaking. Isabella, I don't understand. If you have all this money, why didn't you tell us? I looked around the table at my family, successful, accomplished people who'd somehow convinced themselves that their quiet sister was a struggling freelancer barely making ends meet. I wanted to see how you'd treat me when you thought I had nothing, I said simply. Tonight answered that question. The weight of my words settled over the table like a heavy blanket. Miguel loosened his tie as if he suddenly couldn't breathe properly. When you thought I was living paycheck to paycheck, I continued, you offered me a $45,000 administrative job. You pitied me. You assumed I was too proud to admit failure, too stubborn to accept help. Bella, we were trying to help, Carmen protested weakly. Were you trying to feel better about yourselves by rescuing your struggling little sister? Dad cleared his throat. Isabella, that's not fair. Isn't it? I pulled out my phone again and opened my banking app. Look at this. I showed them the screen displaying my account balances. Multiple accounts, each containing millions of dollars. Investment portfolios that fluctuated by more money than most people made in a year. Sophia leaned forward to get a better look, then sat back heavily in her chair. This is real. This is real, I confirmed. Martinez Consulting Group has been featured in Forbes, Businessweek and Fortune magazine. I was named to the 40 under 40 foot list 2 years ago. The technology solutions we've developed have revolutionized how major corporations handle data security. Forbes, Mom whispered. The Martinez Family Foundation that David mentioned will focus on education technology in underserved communities. $47 million to start, with plans to contribute another $20 million over the next 5 years. Miguel was staring at his hands, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. Isabella, why didn't you tell us? Why let us think? Because I wanted to know if you'd love me when you thought I was unsuccessful, I said. I wanted to know if you'd respect me when you thought I was struggling. The truth hung in the air between us. For 6 years I'd let them believe I was the family charity case. I'd listened to their well-meaning advice about getting a real job and finding stability. I'd accepted their pity and their offers of help, all while running a company that generated more revenue than all their businesses combined. But tonight, I continued, you told me I was living paycheck to paycheck. You offered me an entry-level job at a car dealership. You talked about me like I was a failure who needed saving. Carmen's eyes filled with tears. Bella, we didn't mean it like that. Didn't you? I asked gently. Miguel, you make about $300,000 a year from your dealerships, right? Carmen, your design firm probably brings in around $500,000 annually? Sophia, as a new partner, you're looking at maybe $400,000. They nodded silently, suddenly uncomfortable discussing their incomes. My personal income last year was $12 million, I said. The year before that it was $8.7 million. This year we're projected to hit $15 million. The numbers seemed to physically impact them. Miguel actually put his head in his hands. I've been supporting local charities, funding scholarships and contributing to community development projects for years. The foundation is just a way to formalize and expand that giving. Mom's voice was barely a whisper. Isabella, how did we not know any of this? Because you never asked, I said simply. You saw what you expected to see. The old car, the simple clothes, the small apartment, and you assumed that told my whole story. But if you wanted us to know, why didn't you just tell us? Sophia asked. I smiled sadly. Would you have believed me? If I'd walked into last year's Christmas dinner and announced that I was worth $94 million, would you have taken me seriously? Or would you have thought I was delusional? The silence that followed was answer enough. Dad finally spoke, his voice heavy with regret. We would have thought you were having some kind of breakdown. Exactly. It was easier for you to believe I was struggling than to consider that maybe I'd built something extraordinary. I reached for my purse and stood up from the table. My family watched in stunned silence as I pulled out a black credit card. The kind that has no spending limit and requires a minimum net worth to obtain. Dinner tonight is on me, I said, placing the card on the table. Happy birthday, Mom. I hope it's been educational. As I walked toward the exit, I heard Carmen call out, Isabella, wait. I turned back to see my entire family staring at me with a mixture of shock, regret, and something that looked like awe. Where are you going? Mom asked. Home. To my penthouse. To review the quarterly reports for my multimillion-dollar company. Can we talk about this? Can we start over? I looked at my family, really looked at them. They were flawed and had made assumptions, but they were also genuinely remorseful. And despite everything, I still loved them. The foundation is hosting a launch event next month, I said. Black tie, 200 guests including the mayor and several Fortune 500 CEOs. You're all invited if you'd like to see what I've actually been building for the past 6 years. We'd love that, Dad said quickly. Good. But come prepared to see me differently. Not as your struggling little sister who needs saving, but as someone who might actually have something to teach you. As I walked out of the restaurant, I heard Miguel say to the others, Did that really just happen? Yes, I thought, smiling as the valet brought my old Honda Civic around. Really did. Sometimes the most powerful revelation isn't what you say. It's what you let people discover about themselves.